Welcome to our specialized training course. In this recording, we will give some suggestions for supporting dyslexic students. After a short warm-up, we'll share some ideas about pedagogical adjustments. After that, we will go to adult learning strategies and some tips for using technology. But first, as a short warm-up, you could stop the recording for a moment and write short reflections to these questions. Which pedagogical adjustments do you already make to support dyslexic students? Which learning strategies work for you personally, and what do you recommend to your students? And which technological tools do you recommend to your students? After you have finished writing, please restart the recording and hopefully you will get some new ideas. First, let's take a look at pedagogical adjustments which help dyslexic students to succeed in their studies. On this slide, you see individual support measures that are beneficial based on the slowness in processing and producing texts. Please remember that dyslexic students need more time for processing. Firstly, a possibility to review the material in advance. For example, the lecture slides in advance. It is very beneficial for dyslexic students. Another alternative is to give the student a possibility to record lectures so that they can return to the material later on. That is crucial for dyslexic students many times, but naturally beneficial also for the other students. In many universities, dyslexic students are given extra time in written exams. And this is simply because of the slowness. A dyslexic student needs more time for understanding the questions correctly. And they need more time to produce coherent answers, more time that they can show what they actually have learned and what they can. It is allowed to the teachers to explain exam questions in other words during the exam. This, of course, requires a bit of sensibility. It can be done individually for the dyslexic students, or sometimes you can even do that for all exam participants in the beginning of the exam, if the teacher is supervising their own exam. For dyslexic students, a possibility to use computer in written exams is highly beneficial, since writing by hand is often challenging. It has to do with the processing and with the motor skills. On these slides, the individual support measures are beneficial based on the concentration-related challenges. Like we remember, dyslexia has to do with the thinking and processing text and with the neurological processes. So that's why the concentration is also something that a student might need support with. Some cases, it is even necessary to have a private space for completing the exam. That is something that perhaps can be rather simply organized in the university. Of course, it requires some organizing, but it can often be managed. An easier measure is to allow the student to use noise-canceling headphones during the exam. That helps the concentration a lot. It is also allowed for the teacher to ignore mistakes clearly caused by the learning disorder. When we talk about dyslexic students, for example, repeated typos is a typical case. Naturally, it is good to discuss these practices with colleagues at your own university and make sure that you have equal way of giving these adjustments to dyslexic students. On the earlier slides, you saw some examples about the individual adjustments, but since specific learning disorders are always individual, also these adjustments and support measures can and should be tailored to individual students. It is good for us to think about also about the other possibilities of the university services. For example, university libraries might have some possibilities to support dyslexic students, for example, giving extended loan period for course books, or perhaps there is some audiobook libraries that might be available for students. And what is important, we should know who to contact at our own university if we want to ask for more details support for these practicalities. So please find out who is the contact person at your university. It is totally okay if you are yet not familiar with these practices, but it is good to know that you can ask about these questions. When we talk about individual support measures, there are few approaches to the theme. Traditionally, we might think that we give the same equal support to all students, and then the students either manage to see the play field, and then some students perhaps don't see the play field. But in the modern university world, we start going towards the direction that we are actually allowed to give individuals more support if there is a clear reason for it. We can give support measures to make sure that each and everyone has a fair chance of completing their studies, to see what's on the play field, so to say. In an ideal world, we could actually build our university education so that it wouldn't make offense, that it would be kind of a same treatment that would then allow each individual to do their thing and success in the studies without extra supports. But in most cases, we still live in a world where, for example, an extra time is needed. This is just to give a short reflection about the equality, equity discussion, which is actually behind the individual support measures. Then let's talk shortly about the adult learning strategies. Effective learning strategies are crucial for dyslexic students, at the same time beneficial for every student. Even though university students already have a lot of good learning strategies and practices, we should keep encouraging the students to adopt different approaches to make sure that they success on the university level and later on in the working life. Here's just a few ideas that you could perhaps share as part of your own pedagogical practices. You can always remind your students that there are different ways of learning. Some are so-called visual learners, some learn well by hearing, and others are verbal learners, so to say. For the visual learners, using colors is an effective learning strategy. Post-its is a good way of revising the information, for example. The so-called oral learners, the auditory musical learners, benefit if they can record lessons or lectures and then listen. You can also suggest the student to record and listen to their own revision notes. Or they can also utilize audiobooks and text-to-speech functionalities on the computer to make sure that they learn effectively. The verbal learners benefit if they can explain, for example, an essay structure to another student, because the act of having to mentally structure and then verbalize a concept to someone else can help their own understanding. They can also utilize the dictation functionality of the computer. A bit more about these functionalities in the very last part of this presentation. Also, effective organization is challenging for dyslexic students. Like we remember, the neurodiversity causes sometimes challenges for especially for learning with study-related challenges. That is why a clear structure in all materials is crucial. And specific tips are using a planner on a computer or a traditional calendar to keep track of deadlines. For students with learning difficulties, a traditional handwritten planner is many times the best solution to keep track of timetables. Setting realistic goals to complete assignments on time is important, and we can always encourage our students, remind them about the importance of small steps. This is something that students who have challenges in the neurodiversity struggle with. They don't know how to cut the big materials into smaller pieces just to make the smaller steps. It doesn't come naturally for them. We can ask our students if they keep forgetting deadlines, keep forgetting meetings, really to start using the reminder functions on the telephone, for example. And also, in the modern world, we can encourage them to minimize distractions, to set a time for a task, and to switch off the phone and social media. That is something that we can remind our students about. At a university, we might think that our students automatically do these things, but it is not always that way. So a kind reminder is beneficial to everyone, but crucial if there is a student with dyslexic challenges, for example. When we talk about the strategies, we are perhaps going towards this world where we educate all our students, remind our students about the effective working methods. There we give the same support to everyone. It is something that benefits everybody. It is crucial for the weakest students, but if you do it in a nice and professional way, it is something very helpful also for the advanced students. As the third bullet in this recording, we want to share some tips on technology to support the students. First of all, technologies offer hands-on support for dyslexic students and naturally for everyone, for the studies and for work. As a university professional, it is good to choose your own approach. If you are very keen on new technologies, sky is the limit. You can go ahead and try out new applications, appear all the time. If you are not too interested on testing new technologies all the time, it is actually good to start with one tool and test it. And also for the dyslexic students, many times less is more. If you advise them to use one or two tools, that might already be more than enough. And a good thing to know is that if you then know the logic of one tool, so the logic is often similar. It gets easier and easier with the technology once you learn how to use one. On the following slides, a short examples from Microsoft Word about the dictation tools and the immersive reader functionalities. When you go to your Word, Microsoft Word, you will find a dictate tool on your Home tab. Dyslexic students sometimes have big challenges with producing texts, writing texts, but they might be quite talented in speaking. And that means that with the dictate tool, they can actually talk their ideas and the tool changes the talk to text. It takes a bit of getting used to, but after a few minutes testing, you can already write, so to say, pretty well by talking. For example, this piece of text was mainly produced by the dictate tool. I only then did some structuring and editing afterwards. The immersive reader functionality in the Microsoft Word is also very useful, especially for dyslexic students. When you go to the View tab, you can activate the immersive reader. When you place text on the immersive reader, the following functionalities appear. You can first of all listen to the text. The fact that you can a dyslexic student can listen to the text at the same time as they read the text helps a lot. It, for example, helps to detect some typos in their own texts or understanding a longer text better. They can also adjust the time to make it slower or faster. Dyslexic student also get support from the line focus functionality. It stops the text from jumping, which is sometimes a challenge. And there is actually quite a good translation tool. In the past few years, the technology has developed a lot. Just go ahead, test and listen to a text. You might be really surprised how high the quality of the speaker actually is nowadays. We really hope that you got some new ideas from this recording. To sum it up, about the adjustments for dyslexic students, the main thing is to give extra time due to the slower processing. The extra time can be in the exam time. It can also mean that you give them extra time for preparing for a lecture by giving them the slides in advance, or at least sharing the slides afterwards, so that during the lecture they can concentrate on the content instead of trying to write notes. An important message is that we are allowed to make special arrangements for dyslexic students. We can do that, and based on the law of equity, we are actually supposed to. Remember to check the process at your own university and check who is the person who can help you as a teacher or as a staff member with these questions. You don't have to figure out everything on your own. Then you can recommend study skills and techniques to your students, different approaches to different students. You might know what works well in your own field of expertise. And all the time we remember that different approaches work for different students, and that is fully okay. In the end, you heard just a few very short tips about the technology. We used Microsoft Word as an example, but also other programs have similar functionalities. Just go ahead and test and ask students which tools they already use. They might be more talented in using technology than we are. The main message here is that we can support students with dyslexia and other difficulties. Thank you for listening. We want to remind you in the end that dyslexia is a very complex phenomenon. And this presentation is an introduction and aims to give higher education professionals everyday tools and knowledge which make the working with special needs students more successful. If you want to do some further reading, you can, for example, go to the webpage of International Dyslexia Association or British Dyslexia Association. You can also find your national educational institution for dyslexia and special needs support. They provide information and examples in your own language. Thank you very much for listening.